Recently, in discussion with creationists, the subject of Noah's flood came up. This in and of itself is not that surprising, but when it came up I realised that I have many questions, but also that, at the same time, I didn't. What I mean by this is that I have many questions, but I had never really especially thought deeply about them, nor had I collated them. Which is the point of this next series of videos, which contain a compendium of the questions I have with regards to Noah's flood. This series is divided into 3 videos, with the first video containing questions on geology and climate science, the second video dealing with biology, and the final video with the logistics of the ark and physics. First up, geology. 1. The landscape. The flood is described as a catastrophic, destructive event. It is claimed to have created the canyons we see around the world, carving them out as the water receded. It is often claimed that the landscape was immensely different before the flood and that the mountains were much lower or non-existent. A. What mechanism caused the mountains to be formed? This is a constructive event that somehow occurs during a destructive event. How does it happen? B. Geologists have identified mega-flood related structures, most famously the channel scablands of Washington state, which were formed when a glacial lake burst and millions of tons of water raced towards the Pacific. It is marked by boreholes, massive ripples and U-shaped valleys. If there had been a global flood, we'd expect to see these features everywhere. Why don't we? C. Floods tend to go in fairly straight lines, especially large ones, and yet the meandering Grand Canyon is claimed to be a result of this flood. How? How are the meanders formed during a catastrophic flood? D. Confusingly, many of the strata found in the Grand Canyon are claimed to have been deposited during this flood, and then the canyon carved out. How were they simultaneously deposited and carved out? Was it solidified? If so, how was it solidified so rapidly? 2. Sedimentation. Floods lay down a single gradated layer. If the flood is as tumultuous as claimed, then we'd expect to see a single massive layer of rock. We don't. A. Why do we see multiple layers rather than the single layer we'd expect from a flood? How were they produced? B. How were aeolian strata laid down during this event? Note that such strata are found between marine layers. How was it suddenly dry? C. The depositional environment for the many types of sedimentary rocks are different. For example, limestone is mainly formed by the skeletal remains of marine organisms, whereas sandstone is formed from sand grains, shale is formed from clays and mud, and chert is silica rich. So these types of rock result from different depositional environments out of different grains, but are found one on top of the other in rock layers that are claimed to be the result of the flood. For example, in the Grand Canyon, ICR claims that what is regarded as Paleozoic formations, from the Tapiat sandstone to the Kaibab limestone, are the result of the flood. Let's investigate that claim, with reference to depositional environments starting at the bottom and working our way up. Tapiat sandstone, marine sandstone, shoreline, sand. Bright Angel shale, marine mudstone derived shale, just offshore, mud. Moab limestone, marine limestone, calcium carbonate precipitates. Above the Moab limestone there is evidence of an unconformity. If the flood were laying down layer after layer, why would there be this unconformity? Temple Butte, marine limestone, calcium carbonate precipitates. Red Wall limestone, marine limestone, shallow sea, calcium carbonate precipitates with chert. Surprise Canyon Formation, estuarial shale, sand and lime. Supai Group, limestone in the west or siltstone in the east, shallow sea or estuarial. Even within this formation there are layers of siltstone and limestone one on top of the other. These are laid down in different environments. Hermit Formation, terrestrial shale and mudstone. Coconino Sandstone, Aeolian sandstone from a desert. Torowheat Formation, sandstone, siltstone and limestone from shallow sea that periodically retreated and returned. Kaibab Formation, limestone, shallow sea. These sediments are made in vastly different environments and consist of very different grains. So, how was such a formation produced? How were layers that form in different depositional environments produced one on top of the other? D. The White Cliffs of Dover are made up of vast deposits of chalk, primarily composed of the shells of coccolithophores. The most striking thing about the cliffs is that they're very white, but the flood, being so tumultuous, would have picked up lots of detritus, and so the chalk beds would not be brilliantly white, as mud, foliage, gravel, etc. would have been incorporated into the formation. How were the White Cliffs of Dover formed? How are they so pure? 3. There are many delicate rock structures around the world. Some are clearly the result of erosion by wind. How would these delicate structures be produced? How would the wind-borne ones survive? If they came after, how would they produce so rapidly? The next two questions loosely relate to climate science. 1. When snow falls on ice sheets, it is compacted, forming readily distinguishable layers with gas bubbles whose content can shed light on the climatic conditions of the year it was laid down. Studies have revealed that Earth has recently cycled between glacials and interglacials. For Antarctica, these records extend back some 740,000 years. A. Did this deposition precede the flood? B. It has been claimed that the entire Earth was tropical, in an attempt to explain the appearance of tropical plants at the poles. So how would, in this model, such ice cores survive? C. How did they survive the flood? D. If they were laid down after the flood, what mechanism would allow for scores of layers to be laid down within a year? E. How is the climatic variability evidenced in the ice cores explained? 2. With relevance to the previous point that the poles and indeed the entire planet was tropical before the flood, how? Just how? What mechanism allowed the entire world to be tropical? If the poles were tropical, then it would follow that the equatorial region would be uninhabitable. Physics simply doesn't allow a large body that is non-uniformly heated to have a single temperature across every latitude, let alone an identical climate. What mechanism would produce these global tropics? In the next part, biology will be discussed. Thanks for watching. Take care.